As it is. Prabhupada was very particular. He gave this title, As It Is. So that seems like it infers that there are many editions as it isn't. That's a fact. Srila Prabhupada stated not only in the Western world, but even in India, almost all the editions do not stick strictly to the parampara process. And so they are not, one will not gain the ultimate benefit from them. So, of course, we know Srila Prabhupada said many things, such as Krishna does not need lamplight from unauthorized commentators. But we should not take the Bhakti-Vedanta purports like that. Krishna also says, Tavati padipatina padipasnina sevaya upadikshanti gyanam gyanina sattvadarshinaha. Just try to learn the truth. How? By approaching a spiritual master. Then what? Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. So Krishna also speaks through his bona fide representative, not the unauthorized commentator. So anyway, just now we're in the 3rd chapter of Srimad Bhagavad-Gita entitled Karma Yoga. And tonight's text is number 14. I'll just go through myself to Sanskrit, if I can see it. I got bad eyesight. Anad bhavanti bhutani parjanyad anasambhavaha yagnad bhavati parjanyo yagna karma samudbhavaha. I think we can try to do the synonyms together, the word meanings. Anat, from grains. Bhavanti, grow. Bhutani, material bodies. Parjanya, from rains. Ana, food grains. Sambhava, are made possible. Are made possible. Yagna, from the performance of sacrifice. Bhavati, becomes possible. Parjanya, rains. Yagna, performance of yagna. Karma, prescribed duties. Samudbhavaha, born of. Translation. This is Lord Krishna speaking to Arjuna, but not only to Arjuna, speaking to all of us also. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rain. Rains are produced by performance of yagna, sacrifice, and yagna is born of prescribed duties. So now Srila Prabhupada's purport. Srila Baladev Vijabhusan, a great commentator on the Bhagavad-Gita, writes as follows. So this is a very long Sanskrit. I'll just mess it up, so I'll skip it. Maybe I'll recite it afterwards. And the translation is, the Supreme Lord, who is known as the Yagna Purusha, or the personal beneficiary of all sacrifices, is the master of all demigods, who serve him as the different limbs of the body serve the whole. Demigods like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, etc. are appointed officers who manage material affairs, and the Vedas direct sacrifices to satisfy these demigods so that they may be pleased to supply air, light, and water sufficiently to produce food grains. When Lord Krishna is worshipped, the demigods, who are different limbs of the Lord, are also automatically worshipped. Therefore, there is no separate need to worship the demigods. For this reason, the devotees of the Lord, who are in Krishna consciousness, offer food to Krishna and then eat, a process which nourishes the body spiritually. By such action, not only are past sinful reactions in the body vanquished, but the body becomes immunized to all contamination of material nature. When there is an epidemic disease, an antiseptic vaccine protects a person from the attack of such an epidemic. Similarly, food offered to Lord Vishnu and then taken by us makes us sufficiently resistant to material affection. and one who is accustomed to this practice is called a devotee of the Lord. Therefore, a person in Krishna consciousness who eats only food offered to Krishna can counteract all reactions of past material infections, which are impediments to the progress of self-realization. On the other hand, one who does not do so continues to increase the volume of sinful action, and this prepares the next body to resemble hogs and dogs, to suffer the resultant reactions of all sins. The material world is full of contaminations, and one who is immunized by accepting prasadam of the Lord, food offered to Vishnu, is saved from the attack, whereas one who does not do so becomes subjected to contamination. Food grains or vegetables are factually edibles. The human being eats different kinds of food grains, vegetables, fruits, etc., and the animals eat the refuge of the food grains and vegetables, grass, plants, etc. Human beings who are accustomed to eating meat and flesh must also depend on the production of vegetation in order to eat the animals. Therefore, ultimately, we have to depend on the production of the field and not on the production of big factories. The field production is due to sufficient rain from the sky, and such rains are controlled by demigods like Indra, sun, moon, etc., and they are all servants of the Lord. The Lord can be satisfied by sacrifices, therefore, one who cannot perform them will find himself in scarcity. That is the law of nature. Yajna, specifically the Sankirtan Yajna, prescribed for this age, must therefore be performed to save us at least from scarcity of food supply. And the purport. Omagyanachram Dishya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksu Unmanitam Yena Tasmai Sigrave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master came and forced open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. So the spiritual master, in a sense, takes the post of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, especially for his disciples. There's a similar verse in the 10th chapter of the Gita, verse 11, where Krishna states more or less that he's engaged in the same business. Just to show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, do what? Destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Same business. So if we may not be perfect, but if we simply repeat as it is the message of the perfect, then we can also speak that which is perfect. One who has the defects of any mundaner, has imperfect senses, he commits mistakes, he has a cheating propensity, doesn't like to admit that. What is it? Imperfect senses, cheating propensity, commits mistakes, subject to illusion. So if you have these defects, you really can't teach anything worth listening to. So what am I giving class for? But if I can repeat the message as it is, Prabhupada said you should put it into your own language also for the understanding of the audience, but not to change the message. So as long as I do not change the message, although I'm full of imperfections still, surely, I can still speak that which is perfect, as long as I give it as it is and don't adulterate the message like that. Of course, we have a checks and balance system, everyone knows, just to stay on the safe side of things, especially in the neophyte stage. And that is three-pronged or three-pointed, you could say, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. In one sense, they are one. Because to be accepted as a bona fide Guru or bona fide Sadhu, you must speak on the authority of Shastra. Must, otherwise you'll be rejected. And the Shastra itself is also full of the examples and teachings of who? Gurus and Sadhus. So in that sense, they are one. But just to be on the safe side, we check all three against each other for what? To see whether or not they concur, whether they agree. And if they do, then we can feel completely safe in accepting the validity of any particular statement, description, instruction, etc. And if they don't, at the very least, there's room for doubt, if not outright rejection. So this is our system of staying on the safe side of things. So we're receiving this Bhagavad-Gita, as is everything else in Krishna consciousness, through the parampara system. So parampara is not an ordinary line of lineage or succession. Or sometimes even like the unintelligent people, they play some game at a party, usually they're intoxicated, they make a circle and they whisper something in the person's ear beside them. They say, pass the message around to the next person and go all the way around. And by the time the message gets back to the original speaker, it's all adulterated, it's all changed, all messed up. So they may argue, well, if that can happen in 5 minutes, you're expecting us to believe that over more than 5,000 years this is still intact as it was? Come on, give me a break. You know, things get messed up in 5 minutes. You have to study the lives of the propounders of this teaching, those in the line. And then you become convinced that it is still intact as it is. You can get the same results today. If it were not intact, you wouldn't be able to get those results, would you? But you can see, at least to some extent, in your own life, and in the lives of other sadhakas, other practitioners, devotees around you, it's tangible. They're making some substantial progress and advancement in devotional service. So therefore, we can have well-founded faith that it is intact, like that. And of course, we have the shining example of Srila Prabhupada. So we are not independent on food, grains, and everything else. Generally in the karmic world, everything is impersonal. They're not hardcore Mayavadis, they're mediocre impersonalists, but everything is considered impersonal. And if you consider anything personal, then you're less intelligent, or you're simply imagining things. Like when Prabhupada uses the term personified, it means one thing, but when the karmi hears the term personified, it means like imagined that, you're imagined as. It doesn't really exist, but we imagine it as a person, like the demigods, etc., like this. But Prabhupada would give very simple examples, even according to mundane logic. Just like in any big city, you have your waterworks, you have your electric plant, you have the gas works, etc., etc. And there are people behind these things, and ultimately there's a mayor, ultimately there's a governor, etc. So just one little insignificant city, it takes intelligence, people, and ultimately someone in charge to make things happen. So what to speak of the entire cosmos, the entire creation, etc. Granted, yes, Christianity, Judaism, Islam hasn't done such a good job of explaining that for intelligent people. But the Vedic literature has. The Vedic literature is a vast storehouse of such information. And that we can be completely satisfied with the answers given herein. Also, just the source from where it's coming has some degree of weight upon it. You could say, just like, I'm just making up a crude example. If you're walking down the street and some wino, some drunk says something to you, passing you by, you don't take it seriously. You take it very lightly, or you forget about it, as soon as you hear it. You just keep walking. Or if you say anything to him, you may say, look, why don't you go to the park and lay down for a few hours, you'll feel better, sleep it off. But if the same day, if you go to some prestigious university and you're hearing some big renowned scholar giving a lecture series, and in his lecture, he says the same thing that bum said, you may not take it so lightly, just because of the source where it's coming from. He's a renowned, well-known scholar, and this university is, putting him forward as being, very learned, etc., etc. So, this is the dictation of Vyasadeva. Where can you find a scholar comparable today? I mean, come on, not even close. Even some Karmi scholars acknowledge his Vedanta Sutra as the greatest philosophical treatise ever written. And we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is considered the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge, and it's by the self-same author. It's his own commentary on his own work, the Vedanta. So therefore it is the most authoritative. There are other authoritative commentaries. Those by the Vaishnava Acharyas. Those are outside the parampara. They are not authorized. It's not simply a matter of ABC or learning, becoming a Sanskrit scholar. No, you have to submit to the process. Tapati patipatina. You have to become a shishya, a bona fide disciple of a bona fide spiritual master. And in this way, things are revealed. You cannot crash the gates by some material methodology. It's not going to happen. You may study these literatures from your own standpoint, but you'll not gain the benefit. You'll not gain the benefit at all. So we are dependent upon everything, but it's from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes in the material world, they try to have it both ways, but you can't have it both ways. Sometimes they say, well, everything happens by chance. And sometimes they say, well, everything happens out of necessity. And Prabhupada says, I catch them. They say by chance and necessity practically in the same breath. That's cheating. You're cheating and I catch you. You can't have it both ways. Which is it? Is it by chance or out of necessity? You can't have it both ways. But they try to have it both ways. And they don't pick up on that. Like they should dawn on them, wait a second, it's got to be one or the other. It can't be both. Something's up here. But Prabhupada would catch them like that. But Prabhupada had this I don't want to call it a habit, but a nice habit. Somebody was speaking, he'd say something off or nonsense, Prabhupada would stop him right there, and he wouldn't let him talk about anything else, and he would just hammer him on this one point. Usually the person would try to wiggle around and talk about something else, change the subject. Prabhupada wouldn't let him do it. I'm tempting to recall, well, I guess why not? I had a little bit of of course we all have association with Prabhupada through the Vani, through hearing. But when Prabhupada was here, I had the good fortune to participate a little bit in his Leela. I just happened to be there. This was in Philadelphia in 1975, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. And at that time, Prabhupada was coming for 1975 for the Rath Yatra Festival, and he came and he stayed 5 days. So Prabhupada liked to be engaged by talking with people. So the president at that time, Rabindranath Sarup Prabhu, he invited one professor he knew to come and speak with Srila Prabhupada. He was an Indian man, but he was a professor at one local college. So only a few devotees knew that this meeting was going to take place. And one of those devotees told me. I said, thank you very much, Prabhu. And where Prabhupada was in the house across the street from the temple. And it was a small, row home, and it was just a few apartments there that Rihasta devotees would use. And they fixed up a couple of rooms for Prabhupada and his secretary and bodyguard, Brahmananda, while Prabhupada was staying. And so, anyway, the devotee told me about this meeting that was going to happen just shortly. So I thank you very much. Ran across the street, into the building, up the stairs, and into the room where there were already some devotees there with Prabhupada. I wasn't, just running in the room with only Prabhupada there. Rabindranath Sarup Prabhu was there. Bhakti Sarup Damodar Goswami was there. Rupanuga Prabhu was there, and some other devotees also. One godbrother of mine, Brahmachari Tattvada Prabhu, was there. I'll say a little later, he played a part in this pastime. So anyway, Prabhupada was sitting, and he had on a cushion, and he had a similar back cushion against the wall, and in front of him was a low table, like what the Karmis call like a coffee table, but it was a nice one, and he had a lamp and some writing material, several books, and a dictionary in the left-hand corner. And my godbrother Tattvada, Brahmachari, was sitting right there, and I was sitting maybe a little closer than you, in front of Prabhupada. Anyway, eventually the professor arrives, and he had brought several students with him. So just by his actions and what he said, he revealed his hidden motivation for accepting the invitation to meet with Prabhupada. he didn't want to just meet a bona fide spiritual master or meet Prabhupada. He wanted to defeat the Swami in front of these students that he brought with him, and that they would take his reputation back to the university and spread it all over. You know, so-and-so professor defeated the Swami. But of course, that's not what happened. So anyway, they come in, and Rabindranath Swarup introduces him. This is Professor so-and-so. He teaches at such and such university, and he's professor of philosophy and Hinduism. So Prabhupada begins to smile and looks at the professor, and he asked him, what is this Hinduism? And the professor tried to use a tactic like, let me try to get the Swami to speak first, and then I'll counter or smash what he says. But of course that didn't work. So Prabhupada says, what is this Hinduism? And he says, I don't know, you tell me. And then Prabhupada began to smile again. And he's looking around the room, and he stops when he sees Bhakti Swarup Damodar Goswami. And he looks at Maharaj, and then he points to the professor, and he says, he's a big professor. He's teaching, but he does not know the meaning. What is this called? And Maharaj, in a very loud voice, says, he's a cheater, Prabhupada. Loud, really loud voice, too. And then Prabhupada, smiling again, looks at the professor and points to Maharaj and says, so he, not Prabhupada, says, so he has called you a cheater. What do you have to say for yourself? And so the conversation went back and forth like this, and Prabhupada called this man easy half a dozen times, but I think more than that, maybe 10, a cheater to his face, and made him admit it in so many different ways. And the man was trying to force Srila Prabhupada to reveal so many things. And at one point, Prabhupada just stopped and says, who are you? Who are you that I have to reveal so many things to? First you become shaven-headed like these, motioning to his disciples. Then there is question of revealing. Somehow or another, the subject of surrender, Tavati Padipati, came up. And so again, the professor stuck his foot in his mouth, so to speak, said, what is this surrender? And Prabhupada begins to smile again. And he looks at my godbrother Tattvavada, who's sitting right here at the corner of the table, and there's a dictionary there. He's a big professor, you know, but he doesn't know the meaning of the word surrender. Please look it up for him and enlighten him. Look it up. So the brahmachari, Tattvavada Prabhu, my godbrother, picks up the dictionary, starts to look up the word. You know, Prabhupada told him to do it. And then the professor became really angry and adamant. No, I don't want that. And Prabhupada said, what is this? We're sitting here speaking in the English language, and you won't accept the English dictionary definition? What is this? And they, no, I want the Sanskrit etymological meaning. And at that point, Prabhupada pointed to the door and said, get out. The atmosphere got real intense. And then Prabhupada added, you don't want a spiritual master. You want a Sanskrit teacher. And then he said it again, get out. And then Brahmananda Prabhu all the time is in the room next door, and the walls are real thin. He could hear everything. He did not like the way this man was dealing with Srila Prabhupada. And all of a sudden you could hear, give some sound effects, very heavy steps coming very quickly to the door. All of a sudden the door flies open, and then Brahmananda takes up the entire doorway. There's no space left. He takes up the whole doorway. And no shirt, no socks, just a saffron lungi. And you know, Brahmananda's built like a mountain. And he looks down at the professor. Excuse me, sir, you'll have to come along with me, sir, now. And the professor, he actually began to shiver, actually began to shake in front of Brahmananda, folded his hands, but I have said something offensively. And then Brahmananda again, before you do, come along. And then somehow or other, I'm not so clear on all the details, you know, years go by. The conversation continued on a little more. And Prabhupada again had the man admit and told him to his face he's a cheater, and had him admit so many times. And the man, so ridiculous, he even said, but I am honest cheater. What is that? That's a contradiction in terms, honest cheater. And anyway, the man kept insisting, I am professor, yes, that's okay. And at the end, Prabhupada said, they were leaving, and Prabhupada said, make sure they get some Mahaprasad. And then Rabindranath Swarup, who had invited the professor, he became very humble and, went to Srila Prabhupada. Oh, Prabhupada, if I would have, foreseen that he would have acted in such a horrible way with you, I would have never invited him. Please, Prabhupada, I don't know what to say. And then Prabhupada began to laugh a little bit and said, that's all right, at least he was chastised. So that's one example of how not to approach a spiritual master. If you do the opposite, you'll be all right. He was not serious about approaching a spiritual master. He just wanted some fame and glory in his university. Let me smash in a philosophical argument this Swami, and then I'll gain glory and etc. all around the university. But his fame was spread around the university, but not the kind he wanted. He was revealed to be the fool that he really was, by Prabhupada. That's what got spread around. Of course, we are all fools in one sense, and it's described that the disciple should feel himself a fool before his spiritual master. But Prabhupada added to that, but that doesn't mean you act like a fool. The spiritual master's instructions is the intelligence of the disciple. Of course, the spiritual master explains everything lucidly for your understanding. That has to be there. That's like Bhagavad-Gita is described as the transcendental ABCs of spiritual life. ABCs, beginnings, elementary. Although it's a very lofty literature, especially compared with other traditions of the world, Prabhupada described like the Old and New Testaments of the Bible and the Quran and similar such scriptures as Yavana scriptures. And they simply deal with mostly just mundane morality. Don't steal, don't kill, don't play around with your neighbor's wife, like that. Krishna didn't have to give Arjuna the 10 Commandments. He was a very cultured personality. Where did he begin? He started on the transcendental platform, on the spiritual platform. You're not your body. And showing from so many different angles of vision so that it would click in his intelligence. He would see the reality of it. It's not just another, theory. No, this is tangible. This is real. And so if I'm not this body, then it dawns on one very quickly, or it should, that simply catering to the demands of this body, both subtle and gross, is not the all in all. There's something more. What is that something more? What is my real self-interest? Because my or me is not this. Even ordinarily speaking, we don't say I body, we say my body. We even say my mind, we don't say I mind. Of course, somebody will try to argue and say, well, you say myself, you don't say I self. But that can be my very self. That's a different thing. But who is the my? Who is the I? That is the real self. Of course, just like when we talk about soul, again, many times we're speaking with other people, we have to redefine things. Because they'll use the same terminology, but they mean something completely different. So many times we find ourselves having to redefine things. When a materialist hears the word soul, it's a very hazy conception. It's like something to do with yourself, but it's not really you. You have a soul. No, you don't have a soul. You are soul. Just now you temporarily are inhabiting this tabernacle called the body, yantra in Sanskrit. So in this way, we separate matter from spirit. We separate, at least philosophically, theoretically, our identity from matter. And by seeing clearly in that way, then with a satisfied intelligence, we pursue the spiritual path. Bhagavad-Gita is said to be on the platform of purification of one's intelligence, one's discriminating factor. If one's intelligence is not satisfied, you won't be able to surrender. You'll always be in the mode of, to one degree or another, of hesitation and doubt. Well, it all sounds really good, but how do I know it's real? How do I know it's true? So therefore, the philosophy is necessary. Another time, Prabhupada said one thing that surprised some devotees, that philosophy is for the neophytes. Whoa, wait a second. Isn't it the opposite? Those who have sufficient brain power can, philosophically, they're astute enough to understand the philosophy. And Prabhupada explained, no, but like when you're in the highest stages of bhav or prema, you're already on that platform. You don't need the philosophy to convince you. You're on that platform. So we're coming out of a conditioned state. So we have to be retaught so many things. And we have to be convinced of the reality of this point of view. Therefore, the philosophy is necessary. Just like Prabhupada chose to give us his rendition of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He could have gave us Chaitanya Bhagavat first, but he thought it more important that we have Chaitanya Charitamrita, because it's a mixture of, there's Leela described, of course, but a lot of philosophy is also there, mixed with the Leela. So that is necessary, that we become very firmly convinced and fixed in our Krishna consciousness, not on a shaky platform, easily stirred up by opposing parties or anything like that. No, but we have to arm ourselves. Just like if you're a part of an army and you're at war, you have to arm yourself. Otherwise, how are you going to fight? So Krishna says, armed with yoga, stand and fight. So ultimately, yoga means bhakti-yoga. And here is the ammunition, so to speak. Srimad Bhagavad-Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is more than sufficient to defeat all the onslaughts of the material energy and to fully convince ourselves. And the devotees should love this philosophy also. Of course, we love the descriptions of the Lord, pastimes of the Lord's personal features, his interactions with all his varied kinds of devotees, and the goings-on in Vrindavan in the spiritual world, etc. Yes, that must be there and discussed and heard also. But also the philosophy should be equally relished, practically speaking. Prabhupada loved this knowledge. It's not that when one gets very, very advanced that one just sits around and, reads Brahma Samhita all day and leaves Bhagavad-Gita gathering dust on the bookshelf. No, not at all. There are many tapes, Prabhupada very melodiously chanting verses of the Bhagavad-Gita and explaining this knowledge. Prabhupada said you can read continually, over and over again, your whole life, and you'll get newer and newer lights, newer and newer realizations, not imaginations, newer and newer realizations, which can be confirmed by a guru, sadhu, and shastra. They have to be confirmed like this. It is not static literature, it is astatic, and it remains so, ever fresh. It is non-different from Krishna himself, so of course it's going to remain ever fresh. I'm just now thinking in this connection, there's a nice verse by Sutta Goswami describing about the Bhagavatam in a similar way. It is Krishna in book form. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Purana, Idam Bhagavatam Nama, I hate that. You know a verse for many, many years, then all of a sudden it's just like, Idam Bhagavatam Nama Pranam Brahma Samitam Utam Sloka Charitam Jakata Bhagavam Rishi Nashya Lokasha Danyam Sasti Ayana Mahat, which means this Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary, or you could say book, incarnation of God, book avatar. It is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God, and it is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. So you pick up the qualities of that which you associate with. So if you associate with Bhagavatam, and you associate with Bhagavatam actually, meaning properly, submissively, then you rise to the occasion of being in your own original glory, your own constitutional position once again, which is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. That doesn't mean you become God. That's ridiculous. But again, you rise to your original constitutional position, where you're all, in that way, all successful, all blissful, and all perfect once again. So everyone wants to become all successful, all blissful, and all perfect, but they have some perverted idea of what that means. That's the problem. We're looking for these things in the wrong place. We're looking in the material world, which is the world of temporality, ignorance, and misery. Who wants temporality, ignorance, and misery? Then why are we looking here? Because we don't know any better. We want the opposite, isn't it? Satchidananda, eternality, knowledge, and bliss, of course. Well, how much? Ever expanding, unlimitedly. I like that. So the material world is not of that nature, it's the opposite. So where does that come from? It has to come from somewhere. So there has to be another nature. There has to be a spiritual nature, a spiritual reality from where it comes. Because it can't come from the material nature. The material nature is the opposite. So in this way we can intelligently accept there must be a spiritual reality. Otherwise where this comes from. It's a very natural thing. And this, in the spiritual nature, yes, it doesn't play by the same rules. Just like in the material world, if something is complete, that's it. There's no more room for expansion. But in the spiritual nature, even something may be complete, it can still increase. Now materially, according to material logic, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that means it wasn't really complete, otherwise how could it increase? But the spiritual nature doesn't play by the same rules. So we can't speculate about it. That's useless. We have to receive our understanding of it coming down from that perfect source. That is parampara. Parampara cannot begin somewhere within the annals of the history of the material world. It has to begin beyond the material world, coming down from that perfect source. And if the absolute truth comes down unadulterated, as it is, in that way, then there's a chance of receiving proper understanding of the absolute truth and ascending to that absolute truth. If we try to ascend on our own strength, it's not going to happen. Well, why not? What do you got to work with? You have imperfect senses, you're subject to illusion, you commit mistakes, you don't like to admit it, but you have a cheating propensity. If this is all you got to work with, you're doomed from the outset. Forget about the details of your particular process. This is what you have to work with, you're doomed. You're not going to make it. You can make a little bit of progress in that way, but most don't. Prabhupada said, just by sheer speculation, a few may come to understand they're not their body. It's possible, just by sheer speculation. Although most don't make it that far. Most go way off course. But even if you do make it that far, you cannot make it any further. From that point on, if you want to make any further progress, you have to submit. You have to agree to accepting knowledge coming down, descending from a perfect source. This is parampara. And in that way, at least if you're honest, in that way you have to admit, at least in this way, there's a chance. The other way, trying to ascend with all my imperfections and limitations, is not going to happen. If I'm honest, I have to admit that. And so here's an age-old literature, practically the oldest tradition on the planet, upheld by great erudite scholars, scholarly personalities, Vedavyas, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, so many, never defeated in debate themselves, and even Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta, so many. So it's worthy of giving an investigation, is it not? Like this. And then in this way one will become convinced, not in a wishy-washy, sentimental way, but in an intelligent way. And then with our intelligence satisfied, we take further steps forward, and what Prabhupada would sometimes describe as our march back home, back to Godhead. Everyone is walking, but everyone's walking a different path. Most are walking the path of repeated samsara, which means the repeated path of birth and death. And what happens in the middle of birth and death? Disease and old age is not a good deal. So the devotee, he's also walking, but he's not reaping any karmic reaction for his activities, good or bad. Even so-called good karma is not really good when you think about it, because you still have to stay in the material world to so-called reap that temporary enjoyment. And birth, death, disease, and old age haven't gone away. So it's not really good when you ultimately. So the devotee, see, he's also acting. He may seem to be acting in the same way as the materialists. We print literature, they print literature. We cook and eat, they cook and eat, etc., etc. But our central focus is Krishna. That makes all the difference. And so Baba said, even when you're walking down the street, what to speak of doing padayatra or something like this, but even when you're walking down the street, you should feel yourself walking a different path. You're not walking the ordinary path. And with every step you're taking, you're coming closer to Krishna. He says, every step you make towards me, I will take at least 10 or more towards you. It's described also for the ordinary person that with every rising and setting of the sun, the remainder of your lifespan, which you do not know how long you have, but it's safe to say it's relatively short, is stolen away, but not the devotee. He's coming closer to Krishna. It's described, the devotees do not come under the ordinary law of karma, but you still do get a tiny token or a fraction of what reaction you would have ordinarily had coming to you. If you were supposed to get your head chopped off, instead you just cut your finger or something like that. Or even if something horrific happens to you, maybe that would have had to happen 100 times, but it only has to happen once. Devotees should feel like that. No matter how many reverses come in life, I will reverentially continue to pay obeisances in all humility. And that gains his ticket, so to speak, to the kingdom of God, back home, back to Godhead. We place no conditions. That's what we're shooting for. That's extremely high. But we're not alone. It is attainable. We have all help afforded to us. Alone, yeah, forget it. It's not going to happen. Krishna is there helping. Srila Prabhupada is there. The entire parampara is there. All the Mahajans, all the great personalities we associate with through Vani and the Shastra, an entire International Society for Krishna Consciousness. We have all help afforded to us. So there's no excuse for being hopeless. And Prabhupada actually ordered his disciples, you wind up your so-called business in this life and go back home, back to Godhead. So he's not speaking some empty words, something that's not attainable. And with the order comes the empowerment to actually do it, to actually carry it out to its ultimate degree, to actually make it. And Prabhupada gave us one very nice confirmation during his Leela about a very exalted godbrother, Jayananda Prabhu. Jayananda Prabhu had left his body. Prabhupada said so many things. If he had any tinge of material desire left, he may have first went to the heavenly planets, this or that. But ultimately, Prabhupada ended up saying that, but I am sure he has gone back home, back to Godhead. If anybody else would have said that, we would have said, well, how do you know? Maybe. But Prabhupada said that. That's confirmed. That's final. And so that gave us assurance that, wow, Prabhupada, it confirmed one of us actually made it. So the idea is take the lesson. If he can make it, I can make it. I probably shouldn't continue just going around speaking around in circles here. I'm going to stop right here. If anybody has anything to add or any questions or comments, I'll try to entertain. Anyone has anything at all? Like, what's that stuff on my nose? Or, well, I shave your head. Well, thank you very much. This is also a kind of inquiry, just giving a submissive oral reception. Thank you very much.